Please subscribe to my channel. Blackmail order bride was rejected until a millionaire farmer saw her worth. She had traveled thousands of miles for a fresh start, but the moment he saw her, everything changed. You're Amara Wilson. The man's voice trembled. His face drained of color, like he'd just seen a ghost in broad daylight. This isn't going to work, he stammered. You didn't mention that you were black, Amara finished for him, her voice quiet but clear. Harold Pierce couldn't meet her eyes. Her heart sank as she stood on the small-town train platform, the delicate hat she had chosen for this moment now feeling painfully out of place. 3 weeks of travel, 6 months of love letters, a trunk full of hope, all of it crumbled in an instant. In your letters, you wrote so well, I imagined. He took a step back, the bouquet in his hand drooping like his resolve. You should have warned me. Amara took a deep breath, holding on to the last shreds of her dignity. Warn you about what? That my skin is dark, but my feelings are real? You never asked. People at the station began to notice. In a town like Riverbrook, a well-dressed black woman being rejected in public by a white man became an instant spectacle. You have to understand my situation, Harold muttered. The community here, my business. I can pay for your return ticket. You seem educated. I'm sure you'll understand. Amara felt a cold wave rush over her, not from sorrow, but from a quiet, rising fury. In his letters, Harold had written about the loneliness of a 45-year-old widower, longing for love. Not once did he say that love had a color requirement. I spent every penny I had to get here, she said, her voice steady. There is no back. Harold reached into his coat and pulled out a handful of crumpled bills. This should cover a place to stay, just for a few days until you figure something out. Then a deep voice broke through the tension like thunder. Is that your answer, Pierce? Throw money at the problem and hope it disappears like it always does. A tall man stepped out from behind the crowd. He was dressed plainly, but there was nothing ordinary about his presence. His eyes, sharp and steady, locked onto Harold, who suddenly seemed much smaller. The man wore visibly expensive clothes, the kind of understated elegance that only the truly wealthy can afford. His sun-kissed skin spoke of years spent outdoors, but everything else, his posture, his presence, radiated quiet authority. This is none of your concern, Maxwell, Harold said quickly, though his voice faltered. It becomes my concern, the man replied, when I see someone I've known for 15 years behave like a coward. He turned to Amara, his gaze softening. Miss, allow me to introduce myself. Alexander Maxwell. I own a property just outside the city. Amara gave a polite but wary nod. Her past had taught her that kindness from strangers often came with strings attached. If I may be so bold, Alexander continued, I'd like to offer you lodging at my estate until you decide what comes next. We have guest rooms that are rarely used, and my housekeeper would welcome the company. Harold visibly blanched. Maxwell, you can't be serious. What will people say? Alexander smiled, though the expression was cold and razor-sharp. You mean the same people who do business with me every day, who rely on my land to feed their families. I'd be very interested to hear what they have to say. Harold paled further. Everyone on that platform suddenly realized something. Alexander Maxwell wasn't just any farmer. He owned half the productive land in the region. His word carried more weight than Harold's rejection ever could. But no one, not even Alexander, could guess that Amara carried more than just a trunk full of dresses. She carried a secret, one that would alter the very fabric of Riverbrook. one that would make Harold Pierce regret the day he decided a person's worth could be measured by the colour of their skin. If this story of dignity, rejection, and quiet power moved you, subscribe to the channel and stay tuned for the incredible transformation that followed. The Maxwell estate was far from the modest property Alexander had mentioned. It was a grand Victorian mansion, surrounded by endless acres of fertile land, vibrant gardens and pastures where sleek thoroughbreds grazed under the sunset. As the carriage passed through ornate iron gates, Amara couldn't help but feel a mix of awe and suspicion. "People here aren't used to difference," Alexander said, nodding toward the stately home. Riverbrook was built by families who still pretend the past never ended. Harold Pierce is just a symptom of a much deeper illness. At the door, a middle-aged housekeeper greeted Amara with a dignified smile. Her name was Mrs. Foster. She stood upright, her posture formal, but her eyes were kind. "I've prepared the blue room, the one with the best view of the garden," she said, leading Amara through hallways lined with priceless paintings and antique furniture. That evening, they dined in a grand room lit by a sparkling chandelier. As dinner was served, Alexander shared his story. He was the son of a northern banker and a school teacher who had been an active abolitionist. He had inherited both his wealth and his convictions. When he moved to Riverbrook 15 years earlier, the townspeople had called him eccentric. Too rich to ignore, but too principled to understand. He had always been accepted enough not to be ostracized, but too different to ever be fully embraced. That tension lived in Alexander Maxwell's every word. "And what about you, Miss Wilson?" he asked, after describing his various businesses. "Your letters must have been impressive." For Harold to extend such a formal invitation, he rarely does anything without careful thought. Amara hesitated, but something in Alexander's direct, unembellished manner made her feel unexpectedly safe. "I was a teacher in Boston. I taught literature and history at a school for girls of color. When the school closed due to lack of funding, I realized I had to start over, somewhere new." What she didn't say was the real reason behind the letters. Her grandfather's unexpected inheritance, left by a man who had spent his entire life as a butler in a wealthy household, wasn't just money. It included carefully stored gold coins and documents, ancient land documents that, if valid, could change the fate of certain properties in Riverbrook. She had hidden them in a false bottom of her trunk. In the days that followed, Alexander gave her a rare gift: space, no prying questions, no veiled judgments, just freedom to think. The mansion's vast library became her haven. She immersed herself in the local history, geography, and especially the laws that governed land ownership in the region. Whenever someone asked what she was researching, she would smile gently. "Just broadening my horizons." A week into her stay, news of her presence had rippled through Riverbrook. Curious visitors began to trickle, then pour into the Maxwell estate. Merchants' wives, the Reverend, even the mayor's cousin, all suddenly remembering important matters to discuss with Alexander. "Just look at that," he muttered during afternoon tea after one such delegation left. "You've become the local attraction without ever stepping foot in town." Amara sipped delicately from her porcelain cup, her eyes cool. "I've always been an attraction, Mr. Maxwell. The only difference now is the teacup." Then, one afternoon, Harold Pierce arrived unannounced, hat in hand, face stiff with feigned concern. "Maxwell," he said with forced cordiality, "I just came to check on Miss Wilson, to see that she's comfortable." "Delighted," Alexander said, his tone dry. "But why not ask her yourself?" Harold turned as Amara entered the room. Gone was the tired, humiliated woman from the train station. She wore a beautifully altered dress from Mrs. Foster's careful hand. Her back was straight, Her gaze was steady. She had become what Harold had never imagined, a woman entirely beyond his reach. "Mr. Pierce," she said coolly. What an unexpected surprise. "Miss Wilson," Harold said, nervously twisting his hat. "I came because, well, the community is concerned." "How kind of them," she replied flatly. "About your situation," he added quickly, glancing at Alexander. "It's not proper, you see, for an unmarried woman to live in the house of an unmarried man, especially when she's black," Alexander finished, his voice dangerously calm. "Go ahead, Pierce. Finish the sentence." Harold swallowed. "The church committee. They're organizing a collection to help her return to Boston." Amara smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "How generous," she said, "but I'm afraid my plans have changed. I intend to remain in Riverbrook indefinitely." Harold's eyes widened. That's impossible. You don't know anyone here. You have no job, no family." "I have a job," Amara replied smoothly. "Mr. Maxwell has offered me a position." "I'll be the librarian," Amara said simply. "Apparently, generations of Maxwells have accumulated books without ever organizing them." Harold blinked in disbelief. "You can't be serious." Alexander's response was unwavering. "I've never been more serious. Miss Wilson is educated and capable. My library has never been in better hands." What Harold didn't know, what almost no one realized, was the real significance of that position. The Maxwell Library held far more than novels and classics. It contained land records, legal filings, and the full documented history of Riverbrook, pages many powerful families would rather remain forgotten. As Harold left, defeated and seething, Alexander watched from the window,